Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Psychedelic Sacred Medicines, Purpose and Business. I'm your host, Beth Weinstein. I'm a spiritual business coach helping you align with your purpose and grow your business so that you can help more people, share your unique medicine, and create freedom and abundance doing work that you love. And today, I'm really excited to have a couple who have been leaders in the psychedelic integration in the psychedelic world. Catherine Auman and Greg Lawrence. Hi, guys, both of
Hi,
you.
Beth. Hi, everybody.
So good to have you here. So just a little background. Catherine is a licensed marriage and family therapist specializing in helping people find love and awareness. Greg Lawrence is a psychedelic integration and transformational coach. Together, Catherine and Greg are on a mission to help others realize that they can create a true soulmate relationship. And you can check out their links here on the webpage and grab their free gifts. But Catherine and Greg, one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on here was specifically because of this work that you do that's so niche in this area of psychedelic sex, love, relationships. But before we get into that, I would love to hear both your stories. How did you make a career out of what you're up to now, psychedelics and, therapy, transformational coaching? What took you on this path? I'm curious.
Oh, I'll start. So about 7 years ago, my life got kind of turned upside down. I was in a very bad place at that time. And I realized during all that I had a lot of childhood trauma that I had not dealt with at all. I'd been swept under the carpet because that's what we did in my family. We didn't talk about things. That's how we worked things out. So I had, unfortunately, in my late 20s, gotten involved in hard drugs. So I stopped using all substances except for cannabis, which I've used for about 20 years. So around this time, I decided I want to start healing. I started working with a psychotherapist, a coach, and at the time I smoked cigarettes. And my coach said, I heard that psilocybin helps with that. So I thought, I've taken mushrooms before. I can do that. I got some mushrooms and got smacked upside the head with everything that had happened in my life, all the patterns, all the resulting behaviors, all the problems and my part in them. And I just thought to myself afterwards, wow, now that I've seen that, everything's going to be different. And in about 4 or 5 weeks, everything was pretty much the same as it was. And let's rinse and repeat. And I started investigating and happened on the concept of psychedelic integration. I had no clue what that was. I went to an integration circle. I eventually started leading those. I've been facilitating integration circles for almost 5 years now. But while I was there, I started investigating integration. I started making changes in my life. I started coming up with my sort of own flavor of integration, and eventually got certified as a coach, started working in integration, and gave up my business of 20 years, which was in IT. I owned my own business. I worked from home. I was fairly successful, but this is what I was meant to do. So I just hung up my shingle from my old business and put it away about 3 years ago, and I've been at this full time ever since.
Oh, wow. I see. Those are the stories from IT to psychedelic integration. I love it. We all have them. I get it. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. And then, Catherine, what was your, how'd you become a therapist?
Well, I had been in therapy for so long, and and I started thinking I could sit on the other seat, but all the graduate programs had to do with watching rats run through mazes and so forth. And I had been a spiritual person also for the longest time. And when I discovered transpersonal psychology, I dropped everything and went to the only accredited transpersonal psychology school at the time. And I found that I was truly at home there. And, I had taken psychedelics at Grateful Dead shows and so on, and in college, the whole thing. And one of the things we studied in transpersonal graduate school was, along with Eastern religions and shamanism and somatic therapies and every type of alternative therapies in addition to traditional mainstream psychology. Stan Grof was one of the founders of transpersonal psychology. So we also, even though LSD research was illegal at the time, we studied his work and we saw it as a legitimate form of healing way back then. So I've always been interested in this space, very excited when it started to become more mainstream. I've been on the MAPS list even before Michael Pollan's book came out. So I didn't change from an IT or lawyer career or anything. I was just always kind of meant for this work.
Mm. Yeah, no, I get it. It's like, eventually after your own path of healing, you just want to come back to this place of service. I mean, and the reality is we're always continuing the path of healing. There's always more. There's always the onion layers. It never, the integration and the therapy and the somatics, it never seems to end. But let's talk a little bit about the work you two do together, which is what interested me. So last year when I put together the series, it was one of these moments where I was like, you know what? I really want someone to talk about sex and psychedelics because I didn't find that it was being discussed out there, either that or it was kind of not discussed widely. And I knew there were probably some people working on it. And honestly, I only was introduced to like two other people, which I found interesting. But since then, in the last year, everything has come up. I even have some clients doing work around healing sexual trauma and, relationship and sexuality in relationship work. What is it that you two do together and specialize in when it comes to psychedelics and relationships and sexuality?
Well, I would say that what we do around Tantra is, to us, sacred sexuality and psychedelics, there are some parallels there. In fact, Catherine has a talk she does called Tantra and the Psychedelics of Sex, which explores those parallels. But what our mission is to help people realize that they can have what we have, and that's a true soulmate relationship, that they can create that. It's a matter of working on yourself and then working on your relationship like you work on yourself. So we have so far a series of 6 modules to what we call the intimacy teachings. They are the science of creating your soulmate, conscious foundations, the foundations of conscious touch, tantric secrets about men, tantric secrets about women, how to be a tantric lover, and then one that we're calling letting go into the mystery, that you have to attend the first 5 to find out what it's about. But our goal is to help people get into conscious relationships and realize that they can create a soulmate relationship through Tantra.
The tantric space is very much like a psychedelic space in that it's very much in this moment. It's not goal oriented. So tantric sex is very different from conventional sex in that it's not trying to get to this goal. So mainstream sex is always trying to get to this goal of orgasm, and the bigger the better. And in tantric sex, we're not so much interested in that. In fact, sometimes we don't even want orgasms because we want to really be in this moment together and connect deeply. And then whenever you're in this moment, that's the moment that all the spiritual teachers are pointing us to. It's like this moment, be here, be mindful, not the present, not the future. When we're in a psychedelic space, we're in that. We don't care what's coming up for lunch in 2 hours. We could care less. We just want to be in this amazing moment. And Greg and I, when we met, started having these amazing sexual experiences where we would be so much in the present moment that we would actually enter this doorway of a psychedelic space. If we've been making love for a few hours, which you can do with Tantra because you're not just going up on this, the conventional sex model is this, and then you drop off. And the tantric model is you go like this, and then you just surf the wave for God knows how long, just until you get tired. And so you would be making love for a long time. We would notice, because you just make love for that long, you have to really be in the present moment. And we would be like, my God, this is psychedelic. We would see things. And I had done some research previously, which I include in my talk. A woman named Dr. Jenny Wade had done a book on, she's a transpersonal psychologist, and she had done work on people who had reported transcendent experiences through sex, not necessarily through psychedelics. And a lot of these experiences were what we would call psychedelic, because people experience themselves turning into animals, shape-shifting, seeing lights and colors, feeling that sense of oneness, feeling the unity of all, feeling overcome with love, all these kind of psychedelic experiences that can come through sex if we go into it with a sense of, well, Greg and I talk about, you have to go into it with a sense of set and setting, just like you would for psychedelics, that you want to have, that you're inviting some kind of psychedelic experience or tantric experience or spiritual experience, rather than we're just here to get off. But there's nothing wrong with that. That's fun too. But when we talk about the relationship between sex and psychedelics, we would definitely include that.
Yeah, and like with psychedelics, it's okay to have an intention, but you should probably temper your expectations and not be after a goal.
I want to have the biggest LSD experience ever. It's not going to happen that way.
I want to have an ego death. I want to experience oneness with the universe. And it's probably, if you choose that, it's probably not going to happen.
Or what both of us, and I'm sure all the other facilitators in the audience can experience. It's like people call you and they want all their psychological issues healed in one session. It's like, we can't do that.
I wish it was that easy.
Yeah, but all of our practices, Tantra is very much about being present and embodied. Because when you are in your body, in that experience, you can't be in the past or the future. The body only knows to be here now.
Just like a dog, just very happy right here. Just very happy. What's going on? I don't know. I'm happy. Greg and I actually met in a Tantra class. I had been studying Tantra for decades, and Greg had been studying for a good amount of time. And we met, and we like to say it was love at first touch. So Tantra informed our experience, and we both came from a pro-psychedelic space. So people started coming to us, couples started coming to us. One thing I talk about is how MDMA in particular can actually help couples learn tantric sex in a way, because MDMA in particular, you go on the chats and stuff and people are all complaining that men can't get hard, or they can't stay hard, or they can't have intercourse. And Tantra is like, that's good. Let's see what else we can do. If we can't do that, or goal-oriented kind of stuff, what else can we do? And we're so in the present moment, and the possibility for deep connection is so much there. What could we learn from sex with those some people can say constraints, but we would say with that lovely possibility, what else is possible? Is sex just what we've been told it is, or is it an infinite sort of, is it a path to spirituality? Well, MDMA can be a great teacher for that.
I'm so glad you're talking about this, because it's interesting. And maybe this is why a year ago I was like, I really want to hear from someone to talk about this, because in my lifetime, I'm in my mid 40s now. I grew up in that culture where we weren't really allowed to talk about sex until kind of recently, the last 10, 15 years, maybe, as I had like close bonding with girlfriends. But growing up when I was younger, it was still kind of this, like, you don't talk about it. But I used to get really intense visions. Like, I have seen the elves, and I always wonder if these are the same DMT elves, because I've actually never seen the DMT elves in DMT, but I have seen them in sex. And I've gotten like this synesthesia of seeing colors, like, alternative universes. And even in the last, with my former partner, which we actually recently split up, I have had what felt like a Kundalini experience that I have only had on day 8 of a 10-day Vipassana, after meditating for, 8 hours a day for 8 days straight. And I've had some like energetic experiences that I could only describe as very similar to these full-bodied light experiences that I've only had on ayahuasca. So it's interesting, because I've also I've had with him in particular, because he was also we were both on very deep paths. Like, he's a somatic psychotherapist. And I actually, when we first got together, I experienced this like jaguar that jumped out of his field towards me. And I had to stop and like, I've had these, and we were sober, like all of these experiences were 100% sober, like nothing. And I've always wondered, I'm like, is this just because I've done a lot of psychedelics, or is this, available to everybody, which is kind of what I've come to know over the years. And I'm curious what you say about also this notion of sexual healing, and because we all know sexual trauma is like plagues so many people, and whether it's you or not, it's like probably within your lineage for many people. Do you go into this like healing trauma, sexual trauma through sex? Like, because I don't even know much about this. I just know I've had these experiences. But are there people doing that? Or are you doing that? Is that part of this work of like, getting into the trauma experience through psychedelics and sex?
Well, we know from the work that we do, all of us in this community, and from all of the somatic work that's going on, that we hold trauma in our bodies. That is certainly true with our genitals and what areas of our bodies that we associate with sex, especially penis and vagina. So there are practices within Tantra that you can use to look for and heal trauma and be held by a partner at the same time. It's very difficult for some people to look into another person's eyes deeply for a minute. I mean, in some of Catherine's workshops, that's what we do at the end. It's 1 minute and people are crying.
Mm-hmm.
You do that for 10, 20 minutes and you're in a ball of water on the floor. Well, try looking in someone's eyes directly, deeply for an hour while you're making love. It's one of the most meditative, presence-inducing, and psychedelic and healing vulnerable spaces you can be in. So developing that trust and vulnerability with someone allows you to connect on a level, allows you to let go of some of the trauma that you may have developed over your lifetime using specific techniques that we help people with.
And I, of course, trust people to find their own path, but I personally wouldn't recommend people use psychedelics for the beginnings of sexual healing, because it's very tender, delicate, and wounded, and sometimes explosive. So I think that doing some more tender work before you went into a psychedelic space would be a good idea. Talk therapy probably first. We offer some, and we've attended some very beautiful actual healing the physical sexual organs and the places where both men and women have been violated. Even if they haven't been sexually abused, they still have heard horrible things about their genitals or horrible things about their bodies. That all needs to be healed. So this all, in my experience of working with people, needs to be done very gently and very carefully, because people are so sensitive. The culture has been telling them they're ugly and non-sexy unless they look like whoever the current hotties are, and turned us against our bodies, turned us against our sexual organs, and so on. So I think that in particular, the psychedelic healing could come later on, after someone had made some headways to go deeper, if that's what they want to do. It's always best to do any sort of sexual healing in an environment of love, because we've all been injured by non-loving sexual experiences, non-loving touch. It doesn't mean you need to be in love, but it does mean that there's just a sense of two people who love other people, love to be together. That kind of space is the set and setting for sexual healing.
Yeah, there's a great deal of vulnerability in the state, just like there is the psychedelic state. So a lot of trust has to be developed, and there needs to be a real air of safety in this type of healing.
Number one, first chakra, safety established, and so as Greg was saying, there are a lot of techniques in Tantra to actually heal male sexual organs, female sexual organs. It's very beautiful and loving. And then person's sexuality changes completely. More able to relax, more able to be in the present moment during sex, instead of thinking about something else, or thinking about, is my body, are my boobs big enough, or all these thoughts we're plagued with when we're having conventional sex, and be able to relax more into that space, relax more into love. And then the psychedelic experiences through sex, like you were describing and that we've experienced, are more likely to visit us. It's not something we can necessarily go out and make happen. I'm going to have a psychedelic experience during sex, but you can invite it through relaxation, through trust, like Greg was saying, through safety, and safety between you and the partner, and you can invite these higher states to visit you.
So just an example. I'm sorry.
Go on.
Well, just an example of that. At one time, you talk about this in Tantra and Psychedelics and Sex, right? The concentric rings.
Yeah.
So we were making love for hours at one time, and I started having the experience of sort of moving through these concentric rings. And I had a feeling of advancing through some levels, and even being invited through and sort of watched over to make sure that it was appropriate for me to enter these realms. As soon as I realized that, and I thought, oh, this is happening, everything slowed down when I stopped advancing. So then I let go of that and I forgot about it. And then it started happening again. It was just one more example of how it's all in the not doing. It's in the relaxation, tempering expectations, maybe having intention, but not a goal, but not trying to get there. Trying to get there is like grabbing a handful of water. You can't get it. But we've seen that many times that it's a matter of letting go, not expecting, and not trying to get somewhere that will get you to a certain state.
And that similarly to DMT or other substances where people have an experience that there are beings there waiting to help you at these higher levels of consciousness. That was the sort of experience we had through this higher sex also, was they weren't really embodied beings, but there was some kind of consciousness that was there inviting us to go to the next level. So that, if that's not psychedelic, I don't know what is.
That's what I was going to ask is, I mean, this is beautiful. And I find this so fascinating because as we know, there's been more and more talk about, sex there's more and more coaches out there. There's more and more people talking about embodiment because we all know this has been a big missing piece in human history for so long, is to be in our bodies, to be out of the mind, to be really present, because most of our societies tends not to be present. But I'm curious, how does one explain, if there is a way to explain, what causes these kind of psychedelic states, like for, a jaguar jumping out or elves appearing after an orgasm, is it just that like deep embodied presence or is there actual, like, do you think on a neurochemical level, there's like DMT being released? Like do you know what's really happening?
Well, I think there is an aspect of ego dissolution, of melding into another person, of not holding on to our concepts of what beings and consciousness are, and tapping into other realms.
Yeah, I think there's definitely other realms of consciousness. And that's one reason people are attracted to psychedelics, is because we're shown that this is not the only reality. And many people have never even questioned that before. So you start understanding that there are other realms of reality, and sometimes you're invited to visit them for certain periods of time. Sometimes there may be guides, there may be inexplicable experiences, but certainly the nervous system is capable of more than what we know.
And I think that sometimes people interpret certain things. There are certain sort of archetypical images that we might attach to something that's happening to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And maybe it doesn't have to mean so much, it just is. I'm curious, is there an integration process for this depth of work, especially let's say couples, couples that are intentionally maybe even on their own working with MDMA or psilocybin or bringing, intention to their relationship or their sex. What do you recommend for the integration? Because as we know, integration is extremely important to all psychedelic experiences, but is there a kind of specific integration process for this kind of work?
Well, I would say that like psychedelic integration, it varies from person to person and couple to couple, but there is definitely an integration aspect to this, and that you may have this experience of being in higher states, of some sort of healing, of connecting with each other, of resolving past conflicts in some way. But the question is, what are you going to do with that when you come back to the real world? What shifts, changes, or maybe mental shifts you're going to make that are going to help influence the way that you conduct yourself? Not necessarily just for having these transformational experiences, but certainly if you're doing some sort of healing, couples working together on things like conflict or trying to make things better in their relationship, there are always some sort of changes or some sort of practices to integrate into your daily life. You need to be mindful of those.
Yeah, so usually I'll meet with a couple, or as a licensed therapist, or the two of us will meet with a couple ahead of time and really assess the state of their relationship and what's really up to be worked on right now. Where's the log jam? And then after the experience, then some tentative goals might be made around that. And then after the experience, it's like, what can actually be used? So that you didn't just, getting high is great, feeling great levels of ecstasy is very healing in and of its own. And I don't mean ecstasy, MDMA. I mean, ecstatic experience is healing on its own. But then what are you going to actually do with it so it becomes a healing property? And one thing I always would caution couples is that there's going to be an ego backlash. You're going to be so deeply close, and then you're going to come back out the next morning, be cranky, and see all your partner's faults. It's like, this is just the ego trying to mess with the free state that you were in. So you can just look forward to that. Go, I'm going to be a cranky bear, and I'm not going to listen to all this nonsense. And then that's just part of the experience. The ego wants to regain control, and it does to whatever level it's going to.
There's also a very post-psychedelic quality in this, and that sometimes it's just showing you where your resistance is. This feels like a problem. What can I do about this?
It's so funny because I've gone down to the jungle a bunch of times to work with ayahuasca, and it's this 2 weeks of not always easy, but you leave there essentially in that bliss state. And every time, it never fails, 2 weeks after returning, after your post dieta is over, it's like all of a sudden all the shit hits the fan. And I actually have my partner and I that eventually broke up. We went on a dieta together, and 2 weeks later, like, shit hit the fan. We broke up at the time. And it was, there was an awareness of like, oh, well, wait, this is kind of part of that integration process of the waves and the contraction, the expansion, and the ego coming back with a vengeance. And it's not easy. This is where support from people like them, integration coaches and therapists who really get it, help. I cannot say enough. But I'm curious, you talk about a soulmate relationship, and as me having gone through a breakup recently with who I thought was a soulmate, and in a way we acknowledge we actually are or were soulmates, whatever that means. But can I ask, I know this is a big question, but it seems that this is hard, right? Like, it's hard to have the good relationship. Everybody knows someone who's divorced. Everybody knows people going, up and down, or getting married and they break up 2 years later. What is at the root of all this? Like, why is it that it seems like there are very few people who have that true soulmate, great love, romantic relationship? Or maybe this is just me.
No, I'd say it's because people aren't willing to do the work. They still believe in the romantic fantasy that somebody's going to be delivered to them full-fledged as, this is my perfect love. Osho, my spiritual master, said that Tantra is the science of creating soulmates, and that soulmates have all their centers aligned. So that as we continue to work on developing ourselves as people, raising our own consciousness, clearing ourselves, learning to live more in the moment, dealing with our emotional rubbish, cleaning out our past, all of these things, we become able to attract someone at our own level of frequency. So that's why people who've done a lot of work on themselves are likely to attract a soulmate who's done a lot of work on themselves too, which is where we were at when we met. Certainly I'd had a lot of bad relationships before. And I also had to realize that if this is something I want, I'm gonna have to create it. I can't just sit around and wait. I do a lot of work with singles, what I call tantric dating. We can't just be sitting around in this myth that this person's going to show up in the hallway somewhere just because it happened to me once in college and that relationship didn't last. These relationships that don't last are often beginning with a fallacy, which is that this instant chemistry attraction means we're soulmates. It has nothing to do with it. It just means you and I are meant to trigger each other's stuff. Hello, I'm your worst nightmare. So that's not really, that can be the basis for some fun sex and some fun romance, but it's not the basis for a long-term soulmate relationship.
And it's not easy achieving a successful career, creating a successful business. There are trips and traps and all kinds of disappointments along the way, and it's not easy to work on yourself. So when you come up against a disappointment about the way that you are currently, what you need to change, some shadow aspect of yourself, you can't just say, well, I'm done with that. You're kind of stuck with you, so you have to work on it. But we have the option of not doing something like that when we're with another person. And we've been told by mainstream culture that when we see these flaws or we see things that are problems, that it's very easy to just separate from that person and not do something about it. That doesn't mean you should be in an unsafe relationship. That just means that relationships take work just like working on yourself, just like working on your career, just like fixing your car, anything else. There's work involved. One of our students, one of Catherine's students, likes to say that, yes, she did meet the perfect person, just magically out of nowhere after 10 years of very hard work on herself.
Yeah, and our relationship was actually pretty easy. So I don't want people to get the idea that relationships are always going to be difficult. It's actually easier the more you stop projecting your stuff onto the other person and start living at 100% responsibility. That this is my creation, this relationship is my creation. I attracted this amazing human being to be with me, but I am responsible for the quality of it, my degree of fun in it, my how sexy it's going to be. Or if we're going to become that kind of couple that never has sex anymore, you know, all of these things are up to me 100%. I mean, Greg's 100% too. So I think a lot of relationships get into trouble because we're looking for that fantasy person who's going to fix our life.
And a lot of our work is not even directly involved in sex. A lot of it's involved in what kind of environment, what kind of agreements, what kind of framework do we want to have around this relationship? How do we conduct ourselves? How do we address conflict? How do we work with each other?
What level of truth do we want? Because a lot of relationships are based on sweeping everything under the carpet. Yeah. And some successful relationships do that, but that's not what I would consider a soulmate relationship.
Yeah, and I know I've actually been reading some of the Osho books, and his work is amazing, and it's been life-changing. And it's true. It's like I knew that I was always here for a really high level relationship, and of course I've called in some pretty high level people, which, you know, on a deep soul level, it's not always easy because it's not that kind of faux projection or need or like false illusions that so many typical relationships are built on, granted. And it's also, you know, it takes work, and the work can be not easy and very uncomfortable at times, meaning like, hey, it takes a good like look in the mirror to do that kind of that shadow work, or, you know, look at your stuff that comes up. And, you know, it seems like, you know, and I who am I to judge, but it just seems like a lot of our society isn't willing to go there, which I get, you know, especially these days. Life is not easy. It's much easier to numb with something or tune out or run away. But I know there's a lot of people out there who are craving, you know, this deeply spiritual relationship that's actually going to hold your evolution together and have you evolve and have you grow and learn and be these true sacred partners. And that's where I was interested in bringing you on to talk about this, because, you know, there are more and more people discussing, you know, the sacred masculine, the sacred feminine, and different ways of being. And, you know, there's coaches out there all over the place, but, you know, it's also like, okay, who's speaking from the right place, or, you know, how do we know it's real, or, you know, or how do we approach this from this kind of psychedelic positive viewpoint, you know, for people that are interested in doing this work with medicines, as well as, you know, their own spiritual and personal development and inquiry. So I'm curious, do you have any particular tips for people that are looking to, you know, explore this together, or even on their own? Like, where should they start, or how do they, you know, like some good resources other than there are just you two and your work, but yeah, tell people like what they can look into to start on this path or go.
Yeah, we have a lot of workshops which will give you a real firm grounding, because it was the number one thing I wanted my whole life. You know, I had career success, I had financial success, I had whatever. I used to say I have an impressive resume, but my life sucks because I didn't have my my perfect love, and I felt really lost in the sea of relationships. So I worked on it all my life and achieved that. On my YouTube channel, also, you can find the top 8 Tantra books that I recommend. So that's a place to start. And, you know, my book that I'm giving away for free as a bonus for people is my book, Tantric Dating, which was just named by Book Authority as one of the top dating books of all time. I was kind of shocked because I thought it was too alternative for that. But it's really about the way we even start trying to find somebody is out of alignment. We're stopping and we're looking for a love in a very unloving way. I had to realize that I was looking for love, and my relationships were half loving, because guess what? I was half loving. I had no idea. I thought I was a loving person. I gave money to charity, and I had friends, and I had a cat, and I cared about stuff. And I had to realize I'm a half loving person. How can I attract a fully loving relationship? So my journey is in that book, some dating ideas for how to go about looking for a soulmate in an entirely different way. And then as you continue to work on yourself, not to necessarily to evolve yourself. It's I figure basically anywhere I'm not, you can get done. You can get basically done with your shadow material. And until you're done, you're not done. And it's really the quality of life after you finish working on your shadow material. You can't even believe how great it is. And then you're able to be in a relationship without projecting your parents on the other person. It's just a whole different quality of relationship. So all the centers, Osho talks about, all the centers need to be aligned. So if you see in yourself that your safety isn't in alignment, your emotions, for a lot of women, it's not having any power in relationships because we're told it's not sexy to be powerful. On the contrary, men love powerful women. If you find out your heart's blocked and or you're not able to speak your truth, all of these are things to work on to be able to get into a frequency to attract someone who's that developed also.
There are bits and pieces of different aspects of these practices around everywhere. And we've studied with a lot of different teachers. There are some voices out there that aren't as loud, like Dan Richardson, Catherine Ironwood to a certain extent, aspects of Taoism with Mantak Chia and other teachers. But really, we found there was a white space in this market where people could take these practices and apply them to their everyday lives. We attend a lot of events by a lot of teachers, and a lot of times it's sort of parlor tricks of moving energy in certain ways, or certain meditations or breathing techniques or exercises. And there's very little about what you do with this and how you integrate it, how you use it in your daily life. And that's what our practice is about. That's what our teachings are about. Here are some things that you might want to practice that will get you into the tantric state, that will help you practice Tantra from a practical, everyday viewpoint.
And we're talking about the Tantra state, which is like what we said earlier, like a psychedelic state of being in the present moment with each other, not carrying a lot of baggage, just being present. The connection is the most important thing. So, for example, we have some practices that we developed, which is like, it feels like there's something we need to talk about. Can we please bring it up? Oh, it's kind of icky, but we have to talk it through. And then we feel that flow again. So we're always in that open space, that open flow. So what's bothering that space? How can we just be in that flow? So like Greg's talking about, there's a lot of Tantra techniques, like do this huff and puff and roll around here and there. And we're like, okay, that's interesting, but what does that have to do with creating a soulmate relationship?
How does that connect me with this other person?
So
we currently have no resentment between the two of us because, as Catherine said, we clear things when they come up. Both of us wanted that level of truth in a relationship. So it's not necessary for everyone, but that's what we wanted. We had both been in relationships where we hadn't had that, and that's what was going to make us happy. We talked about it early on, and that's what we've done from that time forward. So I'm able to look in her eyes for hours at a time while making love. I'm able to trust her. I'm able to be my most vulnerable, sometimes maybe regress state with her, and know that I'll be held in a loving environment.
So we make these agreements, and I think that for couples who might be listening, I always, when I start working with couples, I ask them, just think about it. It's up to you what you want to do, but would you like an agreement in your relationship where you could tell the total truth, or would you rather not? It's a pretty high bar, but do you want that, or would you prefer to keep certain things private? What do you want? What is a soulmate relationship to you? And then how would you create that? So they're also then, if you have that, if a couple who's listening wants to, for example, make an agreement that they want to be able to have total truth, that means I say thank you if you bring up something that's difficult for me to hear. I'm like, thank you. Thanks for bringing that up. I know it probably was hard. I am grumpy in the morning. I don't want to be. Thank you for bringing that up, because I'm going to work on that. I don't want to be a grumpy person.
Oh, this is so beautiful. It's touching my heart so much because my recent partner and I, when we broke up, it was actually this the strangest breakup I've ever had, but it was the most beautiful breakup because it was all about that. It was like, well, okay, this is hard, but thank you, because we're both evolving so much from this
Right.
breakup. Like, it was probably one of the deepest healing journeys I've gone on. And we were able to process all the feelings together. And, you know, like, I was so committed to radical honesty, which is painful at times, you know, for both of us, regardless of who's the one being honest. But, and this is where I was like, well, you know what, maybe there is hope for the planet, right? There is a way to sit in the discomfort of grief, of pain, of you know, feeling shame or whatever it is, but then also evolve from it, you know, which is on such a deep level, you know. And I also think that this is what the whole psychedelic journey is about as well. It's like, you know, if we're able to sit in all ranges that come up in a psychedelic journey that might be complex or challenging or hard to sit with, or you just want to run away. But if we're able to sit in it and process through it and talk about it and integrate it afterwards, there's actually all this beauty from it. It's not easy though, which is, you know, I think one of the issues, which is kind of why I created this whole entire series, was that there was so much interest and growth in psychedelics. And then, you know, at the time, and thankfully it's becoming more of a conversation, but there was a lack of the integration. It's like, what's the point of doing all these medicines if, you know, you're just going to go back to how things always were, you know? And what's the point of that?
You know, Tony Robbins started incorporating an integration day into his seminars. You don't want people spending thousands of dollars on your seminars, going home and ranting about, and, you know, raving about how great it was, and then looking like the same person with their same issues months later. So they realized they had to tell people, look, you're gonna have to start doing these things when you get home. How can we help you do that?
That's
so
perfect.
Integration overall is getting to be a thing. And what Catherine described about the way that we share our truths and clear things as a form of integration is just exactly what you said. Being in your body and experiencing what's going on when someone's telling you about something you might not be proud of, or that they didn't feel good at a certain time, hearing their truth and embodying that, feeling the uncomfortable feelings that might go along with that, so that you do process it, you do make some change. You're not just waiting for the other person to stop talking.
So well
It takes a
said.
commitment.
Yeah, commitment, you know, and I hope that this series will give people the inspiration to be committed to this evolution and this path that they're on. So, Greg and Catherine, can you tell people a little bit more about what you have coming up over the next few months, what you offer? I know you mentioned your free gift and the links will be here. But yeah, tell people a little bit more about what you're up to.
So do you want to talk about the talks that you do separately?
We have two talk series. One's on psychedelics and the other one's on Tantra, and they're all online. We put them all online during the pandemic, so people can attend from everywhere. And so we have the psychedelic talks.
Yeah, Catherine does one on MDMA and couples therapy, and another called Tantra and the Psychedelics of Sex. I have one called Microdosing, a little goes a long way, which basically is a microdosing 101 course, and the Guided Psychedelic Journey, which is what it's like to work with a psychedelic guide, be it in a sanctioned environment like MAPS or an underground guide. And then together we have the series that we call the Intimacy Teachings, where we take someone through a series of 6 modules to explain to them the different practices they might employ to go towards a soulmate relationship and living in a tantric relationship.
And those are all online, and they're being offered separately. These are once a month now, and we're going to offer them as a series after the first of the year. And they're all on Eventbrite. There's the science of creating your soulmate. So again, it's something you can actually do and create. You can set it out as a goal, just like building your career. I'm going to have this thing. And we have one that's called Foundations of Conscious Touch, because tantric sex is really as good as you've heard it is, but not for the same reason that you've heard. It's not just this, oh my God, we have the wildest orgasms. It's that every touch is different than a conventional touch. So it's a mindful touch. So we teach about that. And that's a foundation course for all other types of sexual exploration that you would be doing later on. It's revolutionary. We have Tantric Secrets about Men and Women, which goes more into the particular healing potential for men and for women. It's just as great for men as it is for women. I think it's great that there's been so much emphasis on feminine sexual healing, but it's really left men in the dust as if they don't need it. And men are very bottled up and sexually injured in ways that they may not even know. Then we have becoming a tantric lover, and then more of the spiritual aspect, which is the letting go into the mystery. So it's what we've compiled. We went to a lot of stuff that didn't make sense to us, even by some famous teachers. We're like, I'm not sure why we're learning this. And we really got it to what makes our relationship the thing that we're both always going, I didn't know a relationship could be this good. Neither of us. We're like, we didn't even know to ask for this much. So we know that other people can have that, and we want to teach people how you can have that.
Yeah, you know, Catherine and I were both hoping before we met each other that we would get into a relationship that wouldn't be as bad.
Hopefully it'll be just not as bad.
That was a
others.
life goal. If it's just not as bad, I'm going to be super happy.
So you can ask for a lot more than that, and you can persist. I just persisted, you know,
Exactly.
and I was willing to go into pain. I was willing to go into pain to find it. And after that, there's no more pain.
So beautiful. I'm so inspired by this. I am so glad I had you two on here. This is just because it's so important. It's so near and dear to my heart that I agree. I do believe that anybody can have this depth of love and heal and explore and grow and evolve, and then, you know, be in service to the world like you are. This is so important. And I know we're going to see this keep growing, I think, in the future, as more and more people are realizing, like, okay, I need to heal this, or I want to have this, or I demand a higher level, you know, spiritual, truth-based relationship. So thank you for being such an inspiration and putting all this incredible work out there and giving this, you know, this different viewpoint of the healing potential of sexuality, Tantra, psychedelics, and this really deep integration work. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Beth.
Pleasure. Thanks for your work.
And be sure to join us. We'll have more interviews on psychedelics, sacred medicines, purpose, and business. See you then.